I have heard of a land on a faraway strand. In the Bible the story is told, where cares never come, never darkness nor gloom, and nothing shall ever grow old. In that beautiful land, on the faraway strand, no storms with their blast ever frown. The street, I am told, is paved with pure gold, and the sun, it shall never go down. There are evergreen trees that blow in the breeze, and their fruitage is brighter than gold. There the throne of God stands in the fairest of lands, and nothing shall ever grow old. In that beautiful land, on the faraway strand, no storms with their blast ever frown. The street, I am told, is paved with pure gold, and the sun, it shall never go down. There's a home in that land at the Father's right hand. There are mansions whose joys are untold, and perennial spring, where the saints ever sing, and nothing. As I read from Acts 21 a moment ago, verse 19 of that context said, after greeting them, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. I want to spend a little time talking about the things that I did last week. San Bernardino Church of Christ there has been a congregation in San Bernardino since the late 1800s. The group that exists that I was working with was a reformation of that original congregation, and it has existed continuously since 1908 in San Bernardino. They've been in multiple places, having to move. In fact, for many years, they filled a building which held 500 people and supported preachers generously, well, all over. For many, many years, they were one of the places in the country that when preachers was looking for support, they were one of the first ones that got a letter, because they had a reputation for being able to do that and being willing to do that. That property eventually had to be sold, and they currently meet in the building that you see on the slide behind me. They bought that building from a Baptist church a few years ago, and it is functioning, I guess, well for the work that they are doing. It's changed a little bit since then. There's actually a wrought iron gate that's had to be put up. San Bernardino is a working class town. I'll describe it that way. Anyway, the picture on the left there is actually the very first thing I saw in San Bernardino when I walked out of the airport. The significance of the picture, and I'll try to ignite this picture here. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this. This is actually the street corner, or looking down at the street corner, where we set up 2 of the 5 days out there. You'll hear me talk about the corner of Arrowhead and Highland. That's this area right here. And then that other photograph is actually the house that was an Airbnb that they rented for us to stay in. Me and another preacher and one of the elders from San Bernardino worked out of that house all week. And there were supposed to be 2 other preachers with us on this effort. One of them had a scheduling conflict, so when it was changed from October to November, he was not able to make it. And the other one, I actually never did find out exactly what happened, but he had something that came up at the last minute that prevented him from being there. So we started off at a disadvantage in that we didn't have as many workers coming in as we had intended. The basic schedule, I'll just cover real quick. Sunday morning, I preached at the assembly. And then Monday, we spent most of the day on the street at Highland and Arrowhead. And then the latter part of the afternoon, right before the close of business that day, we moved over to Valley College, basically to go through the permitting process, to get the paperwork done, and to determine where we could set up there the next day, which is what we did on Tuesday. We set up in Valley College and worked with the college students there. And then on Wednesday, we again went to Valley College. I think I have that right. Then in the afternoon, Wednesday, we moved over to Cal State, where in years past, they had not been required to register and get a permit with the university, but that had changed since COVID. And so we had to figure out their process, and that took a couple of hours, but we finally got all that done, getting ready for later in the week. And then, of course, Wednesday evening, we had our regular services, and I taught that. And then Thursday, we went back to the streets and Highland and Arrowhead, and we're going to learn about it. I'm not going to use last names tonight since how this is being streamed. We met a gentleman named David, and we'll talk about him toward the end of the presentation. And then Friday, we spent the day at Cal State. Friday, by far, was the most productive day that we had. Once we got started at Cal State, we stayed busy the entire time that we were there. I never sat down once, and the whole time I was there, I was engaged with someone. It was really a heartening thing because it had been slow at times during the week, and we'll talk about that a little bit if I think about it later. I don't have as many pictures as I wanted. And most of the pictures I have are of the setup and the scenario and things before we started working, because I was working and not taking pictures. But there was pictures made, and I was hoping to have them to use, and they just didn't get here. I don't really know what came with that, but that's the situation with the case. I'll also mention this to you. The church reimbursed my travel expenses. And they provided the place for us to stay, and then individuals in the congregation, extremely generous and hospitable people they were, provided us meals essentially the entire time that we were there, and it was a good experience from that standpoint. This is a picture of our initial Monday morning. This is right after I got there. I was completely lost as to what we were doing. And trying to figure things out. We were set up literally on the side of a public sidewalk. We are in between a Taco Bell and another Mexican restaurant, which, by the way, has really good tacos. We were set up in an area just off the city sidewalk. You can kind of see, I suppose, there's probably a picture that's going to be better than this, but you can kind of see this curb line here that runs around behind us right there. That is an area that originally had been used for newspaper vending machines, which of course nobody sells newspapers anymore. So all of those machines are gone. And so it's this little area that had been cleared out. It was perfect for us to set up in. There was a bus stop just a couple of feet down the road. There was a lot of traffic. It's in the middle of the busy part of the city. There's a lot of foot traffic in San Bernardino, And so it really was a pretty good place. We met and scheduled studies with several people at this location, and it had been the most productive place throughout the week until the Cal State experience on Friday. What we basically did, we had Bibles that were available to distribute to people who needed Bibles. We had some other printed material, and then we were prepared and had prepared with some things to discuss with people to kind of get them talking. We also had a clipboard, which had the places for them to give us their contact information if they were interested in doing so. And it was a little slow until Friday, and then that information came freely. What we got early on was basically names and a phone number and no other contact information. But even from that, we were able to set some studies up. And in fact, while I was flying home Saturday, they were having one of those follow-up studies. It went very well, and that couple has scheduled another study. So we're hopeful for that situation. That was a husband and wife that I think were in the area trying to earn some money, actually. He had a rake in his hand. I think they probably thought we were a taco stand. There's a lot of taco stands where they just set up like this. They just put a little easy up tent up, and they sit underneath it and sell tamales and tacos and stuff. And I think she was coming over to see what we were doing, and then found out what it was. We started talking to her. She took a Bible. Her husband then comes over, and we talked to them for a little while about some things. Eventually, they did agree to let us contact them and talk to them about a further study. And like I said, that has come to some fruition. There's several people we met that first day that were very promising. We've had some contact problems with some of them, and then some other interesting stuff that happened at this particular location. I've seen a lot of homeless people the last 10 days. I have seen a lot of people on drugs, or really actually coming off of drugs. Tweaking from meth highs on their way down and all sorts of things. And I even on one occasion saw a young man that I'm pretty sure had been shot. His pants were just soaked in blood. There was a big tear in the back of his pants that I think was done so that they could check on the wound. If he wasn't shot, he was stabbed. I don't know which one it was for certain, but this is what I do know. He got off the bus where we were at. He had a mask covering from his nose down and a pair of sunglasses on and a hoodie on. And then when he turned around, I saw the blood and everything. I went to make a phone call, and as soon as he saw me on the phone, he took off. He had been there about 20 minutes at that point, but he took off. So I think it was some nefarious things that were going on, and he was afraid that I was calling the authorities. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff you see in cities, and we saw a lot of it, and we had a lot of those kinds of conversations with people as well, but we had some very profitable ones, and I got a little bit of a closer picture of the setup. We had different banners like this that we used throughout the week, pretty simple, pretty direct. They were about prayer, they were about the Word of God, they were about different things that the hope would draw people in to ask questions about whatever it was that was on there. It's really a pretty simple setup. It doesn't really cost a lot of money to do this, and it was a lot more effective than I expected it to be. I'm going to be honest. If Royce is watching this, I'm sorry to say that, but when I got there, I really wasn't sure that setting up a little easy up tent and a table was going to draw very many people, but and I will tell you this, apparently it was slower this week than in years past. One year they baptized 23 people in a week through an effort just like this. So this stuff is much more effective than what one might think. And what I have learned is people are interested and they are willing to talk about spiritual things. And the idea that young people are not interested in such things is just patently false. Practically every young person that passed by us, we were able to get a discussion with They were engaged. They were interested. They left reading the material that they had taken. They didn't just stick it in a bag or throw it in the bottom of a purse, or they left actually reading the material and showing some interest in these things. And in fact, the most in-depth and profitable discussions I had were with people under the age of 22 all week. It's just wrong that younger people are not interested in spiritual things. We have to get out there and meet them where they are and talk to them. That's what we have to do. They're maybe unwilling to come here, but if we go to where they are, I'm convinced they'll talk. This is our setup at Valley College. Valley College was a 2-year school that had all sorts of fields of study. In fact, all of them just about. They even had a music program, which surprised me. They also had technical schooling that fed into the local hospitals and various places like that. And when I talked to the folks in the library, there are just over 10,000 students. But what I'm convinced of is that COVID was actually still a problem for our efforts at this point. There were still people walking around with masks. There were people that didn't want to get too close to you. But that wasn't even the biggest problem. I think on this campus, COVID was a problem because I think the majority of the students were still working online. And so there wasn't as much foot traffic as there has been in past years on this particular campus. But as I mentioned, we were there on Tuesday and we were back there for part of the day on Wednesday. We did talk to a lot of people and make some contacts there, but it was a little slower than it had been in years past. This is some of the other banners that were used. There's a couple more that were used that we didn't, or I don't have images for. We're still praying. When we used that banner, we very often started off conversations by asking, is there something we can pray for you for? And in a moment, we're going to talk about one gentleman that's exactly how our interaction with him started. And so those are the kinds of things we do. And then we moved, as I mentioned, on Friday to Cal State San Bernardino. Cal State San Bernardino is a large campus. It's apparently a growing campus because it was about twice the size as it was 3 years ago when Royce was there last. They have built more buildings and expanded the footprint, and that was part of our problem in trying to figure out where we should be, and also getting to all the right offices to get the paperwork done. Because, like I said, in years past they hadn't had to do paperwork. So when we asked people, they would say, "Well, yeah, but I don't know where to," and they'd send us to one place. We ended up at the police department, which is way on one side of campus. We ended up having to go to another office on the far side of the campus, and so we did a lot of bouncing around that afternoon, but finally did get everything taken care of that we needed. And this is a panorama of the area that we set up. Now, to make this picture make any sense to you, you have to understand this image is of about 240 degrees. And so this sidewalk right here, imagine that I'm looking straight down that sidewalk. This building is directly to my back. And so I did a panoramic starting there and running all the way around. What you will see is, or maybe you won't see it, but I'm going to tell you it's there. Right here is where we're set up. This over here is the library. This used to be the only student unit on campus, but now it is one of two. And there's a lot of construction going on this side of the campus, and what that has done is it's slowed down traffic down that sidewalk. And so this place turned out to be not a very good place to set up anymore. But when I moved 25 yards this way, everything changed. And this is where I told you that literally from the time I moved until we left, I was engaged in conversation with someone. It was a very fruitful discussion. This was how it started. This picture was taken minutes after I moved the setup. And the gentleman in the umbrella there, with the umbrella, was the first person that walked up to us. And once he responded to me, in fact, the interesting part about him, he walked by, he had earbuds in his ears. Also an anathema, earbuds, don't like them. A lot of people had them in, you couldn't get their attention. But anyway, He walked by, had his earbuds in. I spoke to him, and he just kept walking by. He got a little ways down, and he actually turned around and came back. And we began to talk. He approached me. We began to talk. And once he did that, hardly anyone walked by who didn't stop to talk. At one time, we had more workers that day, by the way. I think that actually contributed somewhat to the situation. We had 3 people there at the time that this picture was taken. By the middle part of the morning, there were 6 of us working. And what that enabled was that if anyone engaged with us, there was always someone to speak to them. They didn't have to stand and wait. They will not do that. So it is important to have people if you're going to be effective at this kind of work. But this was just all day, the whole time we were there. One conversation after the next. The fella that you see right here is a young man named Jesus. This guy right here. He stayed for a long time. I believe that he will probably visit with the church there if he didn't do it today in relatively short order. There's another fellow who I didn't get a picture of. He also was named Jesus. Anyway, we had a long and interesting conversation. He actually left the conversation saying, I wish I could stay and talk longer, but I have somewhere to be. I look forward to talking to you again. I didn't have time to tell him that he wouldn't be talking to me again, probably. But anyway, it was very productive. This gentleman is one of the members of the church there, as is this one. And we had a really good day that day. Got the names and contact information for many, many young people, had some very good and detailed discussions with some of them, and especially with that young man that's in this picture. He was raised Catholic. He had a lot of questions, and we talked about a lot of things pertaining to, he asked about the Pope, and we covered that the Pope is nowhere talked about in the scriptures, and talked about what is there. And anyway, he just had a lot of really good questions and showed a tremendous amount of interest. And I'm very hopeful that that he has started a journey to knowledge and to eventual faith. Now, the next part of this is kind of extra work, another dynamic to doing this kind of work. Once you get out of the 4 walls of a building and you go out on the streets and you find people, you see things that maybe you miss other times. This began as just another contact. This gentleman walked by. His name is David. As I said, I'm not going to use last names. I did eventually get it. It took me about 2 hours to get his last name. He was a man of few words. He answered in 1 word, and so it was slow going, communicating. I also think that there were trust issues, but at any rate. Royce just walked out there and engaged him and asked if they could pray together. They stood on the sidewalk and prayed. He ended up asking for a Bible. And so the picture on the right is Royce. He had handed him the Bible, and they were talking about some things from the scriptures as he was looking through it. David actually spent several hours with us. This was probably a little before 10 when he approached us, and we left David at sundown. I wasn't going to get emotional. This lady right here, I can't tell you how much I'm convinced it is providential that she was there. She is a retired nurse supervisor for one of the local hospitals. It was good that she was with us. In the short time that we had been talking with him, she walked over and said, he needs some clothes. I'm going to get him some clothes. And she left and went and spent money out of her pocket. Bought him 2 outfits. By the way, she's got a gift because she sized him perfectly. He didn't even know how old he was. We asked him how old he was, and he said, I think 41. He had no idea how tall he was, how much he weighed, what size he wore. But anyway, she went and bought 2 complete outfits. She bought a pair of shoes, she bought socks and underclothes and a backpack, and brought all that stuff. As we continued to visit and talk with him, Royce at one point, and you can't really tell from these pictures, but his hair was just matted, and he was, well, he had not bathed in a long time. And Royce said, well, would you like a haircut? And it took him a few minutes to actually answer. He had to ask a couple of times, and he said, well, yeah. By the way, I'll tell you, a couple of times during the day as we talked to him, he actually got teary-eyed. But anyway, Royce then set out to try to find a barber. There were 7 barber shops within walking distance of where we were at. None of them would cut his hair. So Grace said, I'll buy some clippers. Mark and Grace and Royce and Kevin, between the individuals that were there, by the time we left him, well, I'll mention this before I get into that. We also called city services for the homeless. They were not any help. And so by the end of the day, he had been fed two hot meals and then given means to secure more food. He had the 2 sets of clean, proper fitting clothes. He had socks, he had shoes, he had a jacket, which he did not have when we met him. His hair was cut, his beard was trimmed. He was provided with soap and shampoo and allowed to bathe for the first time in a really long time. He was given deodorant and a toothbrush and toothpaste. And it was not easy to do any of those things. It took hours to make all that happen. But what I want you to understand is that these were people who no or a challenge did not serve as an excuse. They didn't say, oh, well, I tried. They just kept looking for a way to make it happen until they were able to get this fellow the help that he needed. It was very moving to be a part of it. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone. I saw that played out in the lives of individual Christians. By the way, everything that was done for him that day, individuals took care of out of their time, out of their money, out of their effort. It was very important. This is the haircut being given. And that was him after he was cleaned up. It was I really pray that that this man can get the things that he needs and get where he needs to be. He was not under the influence. There was no indication that he at least had been under the influence anytime soon. It was postulated by one of the people that was with us that it may be the case that he was actually so destitute he just couldn't support a habit anymore, which is possible. But this man literally had nothing. He couldn't even tell us. We were, we'll bring you anywhere. Where would you like us to bring you? He didn't even have an answer for that question. He literally had nowhere to go. So keep David in your prayers. The hope is, by many of the brethren there that were involved in this, that they will be able to continue to find him in the same area of town where we came into contact with him and continue to work with him. And again, hope that eventually he'll see faith. But I'll tell you, I watched the man sit there and read through the Bible for 2 or 3 hours that day. So he looked genuinely surprised that there was somebody in the world who had any care or concern for him at all. And those are the kinds of things that you don't have to be something big, and you have to be a person that cares. And it's not money. To just kind of set it straight, when Grace left, she was actually going out and was going to buy whatever she needed to buy, whatever it cost. Where she ended up going, they found out what she was doing, and they actually didn't want her to pay for it. And she insisted, so they took $10. It's not about money. It's about time and about care and about doing something. And that is what Christianity looks like in action in individual people's lives. And that's what we need to see. This isn't congregational work. This isn't the evangelistic work that we were there to do, but something else that arose from it. And it was a powerful thing to see. As I close, I want to turn your attention to Mark 16:15 and make a couple of observations. And by the way, as you're turning over there, I'll mention, since Leo and I talked a little bit to it, he asked, did I learn anything that will transfer here and that can be used by us? And the answer is yes. We talked about in the last business meeting possibly getting an evangelism and challenges in evangelism kind of class going. I do intend to do that after the first of the year. And we'll be talking about some of these things that we can actually do and put into practice relatively easily, and actually potentially make an impact in this community, bringing people into contact with the gospel. And so keep that in mind. But turn with me to Mark 16:15, where it says, and he said to them, go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. I want to focus on that word go there, because the word that's translated go in this verse is actually a broad term. A very broad term. It means a lot of different things. Among the things that it means is the idea of a way of life. Not just travel, but a way of life or devotion to something. Both of those ideas are inherent in this term. Maybe more important, I think, than the travel aspect of it is this devotion to bringing the gospel to people. It's not a word that requires actual travel, at least not outside of the realm of your home. You don't have to go to California to do this. You don't have to go to Ghana. By the way, that's where Grace was originally from, is Ghana. I found out that Ghana has congregations of thousands of people that are faithful Christians. And by the way, I got a message on the stream from this morning. There's a new doctorate student at UL who is from Ghana originally, that did his graduate work in Kansas and has come to UL for his PhD work, and he is a member of the church and says that he looks forward to fellowshipping with us. So hopefully he'll be with us soon. But anyway, you don't have to travel across the world to do what this verse is talking about. It does include the possibility of doing that, but it's not a requirement of the word, but it does require active engagement. And that's what we need to understand about the word go. You can't go passively. It means that we have to get up and do something. Go to the people of the world and proclaim the gospel to all of them. That's a paraphrase of this verse. What I want to leave us with is just asking ourselves the question, could I be more active in this work? And if the answer to that is yes, then I encourage that we find ways to be more active in this work. Anybody have any questions before I close about any of the things? I didn't cover everything. I didn't have time. And That's a good question. One of the elders took a week's vacation and stayed with Royce and I and worked with us all day, every day. And then we had that last Friday, there were at one time 7 of us out there working. So that would have been 2, and then 5 of the members of the congregation. We had, I think, 3 for part of the day on Monday, and then one of them had to leave, and then we had 1 the next day, and then 2 the next day, and some of it would depended on their schedule. And by the way, I'm glad you asked that, because participation used to be a lot higher. But again, it's been 3 years since they've been able to do it, thanks to COVID. And that is one of the reasons I'm convinced that continuity of this work is absolutely essential, both from a community standpoint and for the church. And so that's a good question. I appreciate that. But I would think in total, people out there on the street with us and on the campuses with us, there were probably 6 or 7 different people. A couple of them came more than one day, and then there were other people who helped by supplying food or supplying money for food or doing that kind of stuff. Anything else? Yeah. No, we actually didn't. We did that. That has happened before, but we did not. The question was, did we have any mockers? And no, we really didn't. In fact, really all we saw was Jehovah's Witness doing the same thing that we were doing, basically, only they didn't engage anyone. They just kind of sat down with their literature, and if someone walked up to them, then they would give them something, but otherwise they didn't do much. And on one of those campuses, there were always 2 groups from the Jehovah's Witness. And since I brought that up, that actually reminds me of something else. The actual plan is if everyone had been involved like had been in years past, and we had all the preachers there that were scheduled, we actually intended to deploy to 2 or 3 places every day. Because of the number of people that we had, we could only go to one place. And that limits the number of people you contact. So all that does matter, and it affects things a lot. But I kind of contribute a lot of that still to the ripple effects of the pandemic and all the shutdowns and everything. Anything else? I thought that was a good question. Both the questions have been good. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
You said that it's not true that a lot of young people don't want to be involved.
Yep.
So I have 2 questions.
Okay.
The first question is, what type of questions did they ask you? And my second question is, did you have any young people from that congregation involved?
I appreciate both those questions. What kind of questions they asked depended a lot on their background and what they knew and was interested in. The guy with the umbrella I was telling you about on Cal State, he started off by asking a lot of questions about some people that live up in the mountains outside of San Bernardino that are kind of cultish, and I didn't really know anything about them. I'm reading about them right now, and they're kind of cultish. It's kind of scary, but anyway, that's actually where that conversation started. But then it turned, and we talked about more general things pertaining to God and spirituality and the scriptures, and that actually, like I said, and I'll mention about him as well. After we were done, he went on about his business, and about an hour and a half later, he walked up and re-engaged with us again. And talked to somebody else. He didn't talk to me the second time. He talked to Royce the second time. Jesus had a lot of questions about Catholic doctrine because that's the perspective of where he came from. The other Jesus that I talked to, that I mentioned, was more of a agnostic atheist, and his questions were more general about good and evil and that kind of stuff, and just led, the discussion just went from there, and I kept turning it back to the scriptures and basically was trying to get him to understand the idea that truth is objective and not subjective. because I think that's a big problem in our current society, is this idea that I have a truth and you have a truth and this other person has a truth. What we have are experiences, and we have opinions, and we have beliefs, but truth is independent of those things. We covered all those kinds of things. And the other half of your question was, did we have any? Yeah. We had one young person from the congregation that came at least 2 days and maybe 3 days. She spent a lot of time with us. I was very encouraged by Victoria. She's 19 years old. She did not actually have, I guess, the confidence to engage a whole lot, but she was like a sponge. And we actually got rained out Wednesday afternoon. We had to pack up because it was one of the 3 days a year it rains out there. It happened while I was there. And so we went to a coffee shop and had a Bible study, and she was there at that Bible study, and she was just completely enraptured with that. And so the answer is yes. And did that help? And the answer is yes, on two different levels. I think it was good for her, and I think it was good for the church there. She wasn't doing a whole lot of teaching, but she was there to get material to us and to bring stuff to us and to help set up and to do all the other things that were necessary in order for the teachers to be able to focus on teaching and not worry about finding what they were trying to reference. And I think it was good on the college campuses for them to see someone like them among the group, rather than just a bunch of us old gray-headed guys that they might not relate to as much. All good questions. Anything else? We're a little bit over time, so I appreciate everybody's attention, and I hope I've been helpful. It ended up being an extremely encouraging week for me, and as I mentioned, I did learn some things that I hope that we can actually put into practice and see a real difference in our community as a result of it. Yes, ma'am. Probably not in front of Walmart, but places where there's foot traffic. That's what's essential, is foot traffic. People driving by in cars, you can't talk to them. So somewhere, and I've already started looking into UL's campus and what's available there in some other places in town. But yes, that is something that I think might be worth looking into. All right, just think about these things and pray that God will bless this congregation, that will bless our efforts to reach out in this community, that we'll have some wisdom and guidance in the things that we do, and we'll have fruit born from the things that we do, because really what's at the root of it is people's souls. I left here actually not knowing whether I was paying for this entire trip out of my pocket or not. I did not get paid for my work. And I knew that going in, that I was not going to draw a paycheck like people get when they do meetings and stuff. I paid for my plane ticket out of my pocket. I went there on my own dime. The brethren were prepared and intended to reimburse travel expenses and those things. But what I was told is, it won't cost you anything when you get here. Now, I first was under the understanding I'd be sleeping at the building, and the brethren would just be bringing me food. It ended up being a little bit, I had a bed and a shower, which was nice. But anyway, I went there because I wanted to do the work and I wanted to learn. And I think I accomplished both of those things. And then in the end, it didn't actually cost me anything to do it. So it's a win-win-win for me. And the last thing I want to say, and then I'll turn it over and let Michael lead the invitation song, is I appreciate the brethren here. Because the support that I received this week here is what enabled me to do that work there. If that was not the case, I would not have been able to do what I did and learn the things that I learned this week. And so I appreciate very deeply. But the work is going on. There are faithful brethren in the world. Work is being done. People are interested. The gospel still has power. And we need to look for opportunities to sow the seed rather than say, well, I'd like to, but I'm not sure that standing before God on Judgment Day and saying, well, I really wanted to, is going to be acceptable. I think we need to find the way and find the mechanism that gets us to the place where the seed needs to be sown, gets the seed sown, and then let God do his work. All right. Wherever Micah is, I guess he's in the room back there. You can shut it off and head your way out.